Well, most countries of the world are falling behind their commitments to reduce pollution, according to the UN Environment Programme. It says they must prioritise green technologies to protect the planet and revive their economies from the COVID-19 induced economic slump. UNEP's annual emissions gap report finds that lockdowns and other COVID-19 restrictions helped reduce global carbon dioxide emissions by 7% this year. But it says this reduction may be temporary and insignificant. It predicts global temperatures will rise by a catastrophic 3 degrees this century unless countries do more to protect the environment. And the climate watchdog calls for a green economic recovery. It wants an overhaul of global shipping and aviation to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 25% over the next decade. Okay, let's get more on this now with Olhaff, who joins us now from Copenhagen. She's head of strategy at the UN Environment Programme's office at the Technical University of Denmark. Welcome to the programme, Anne. Now, we know that one way that countries around the world have dealt with this pandemic is by shutting down large parts of the economies. We saw airlines grounded, and they're still crippled to some extent right now. That's affected the demand for oil, which has in turn reduced carbon emissions. Can you tell us more about the positive effect that those measures have had on the economy this year, on the environment this year, I should say?
As you rightly put it, basically the emission reductions we see this year are caused by shutting down economies all over the world. So they're not caused by creating structural changes in the way that we produce and consume that are less polluting from a climate context. So that's also why we expect the dip in global emissions to be rather short-lived. As soon as countries lift restrictions, we've seen that emissions also start to rise. What we need is to accelerate a transition away from fossil fuel use towards renewable energy.
Okay, now we know the pandemic is still ongoing. There are signs of hope with possible vaccines being rolled out in countries like the UK and hopefully around the world soon. But you've called for a green pandemic recovery. What does that look like? What do you suggest governments could do to revive their economy in a sustainable and environmentally friendly way?
So what we find in the report is that is absolutely crucial, given the unprecedented amount of funding that goes into economic COVID recovery plans, that this money is spent in a way that supports a green development. What we can see right now is that the plans announced, the recovery packages announced, and some of the rescue measures, of course, do not really support a transition that will lead us away from a fossil fuel-based economy. So what is needed is to look for opportunities for the post-COVID recovery to not only address economic and social concerns, but also to look at whether it's possible to support measures that will lead to more use of green energy that supports, for instance, renewable energy, wind turbines, solar panels, and so forth. That if bailing out airlines, for instance, attach green strings in terms of efficiency requirements and other types of efforts, and so forth. So we really need to promote measures that helps decarbonize the energy sector, helps decarbonize and electrify transport, and also helps in terms of bringing more green investments into nature-based solutions and so forth.
Now, are you worried that as governments really try desperately to get their economies out of recession, that perhaps they'll also push the environment and reducing carbon emissions further down their priority list?
I think it's a risk, especially in countries where a green transition has not really yet taken off. So if you're faced with this humongous crisis and you have to deal with that, and then on top of that, you also have to think about how can we change the way that we produce and consume, how can we create a green transition. That's a really tough thing to have to do. So what we can see in the fiscal spending so far is that it's primarily countries where green transition is already underway that are dedicating shares of their budget up to 3% of GDP to low carbon measures specifically.
Okay, and Olhaff, we'll have to leave it there. But thank you so much again for joining us from the UNEP DTU partnership in Copenhagen.
Thank you.